All right, and so in the writing section, there's going to be a number of very specific punctuation and grammar rules that I'll address when I need to, because they might affect a question per test, or, right, might be more minor. I'm gonna focus on types of questions that have a big impact on the writing, because for every passage, you're likely to get at least one of them. Okay, so one of the questions has to do with what I call the 3 C's transitions. So they're transition words or phrases that connect information. Your job is to determine what's the relationship. Does this information that comes after contrast with the first information? And the 3 C's, I'll get to all of them in a moment, but the first one is, I'm starting with what I think is the easiest one to notice. If what I say after my transition is in contrast with what I said before, it should be pretty apparent. It should be like, okay, this is going in a different direction. Okay, this is kind of in conflict with what was said already. So if it contrasts, we're going to see transition words like the following. This is not going to be a comprehensive list, but we're going to create a list together of common contrast words and phrases. So let me give you a scenario. We got in one night. Someone had been murdered in the house. A group of teenagers went in. Whoa, time out. We should like go to a safe space, call 911. These are the things we should do, right? What would transition from dark rainy night, scary, someone's murdered, they went in? What the heck? What transition would make sense here? Nevertheless. Right? Nevertheless, they went in. What else? However, contrary to intelligent decision, they went in. However, they went in. Others. Sorry? Unexpectedly. And again, this is not going to be an absolute comprehensive list, but we're going to get the most common ones down. Despite these facts, notwithstanding, here's one students don't typically know what to do with. That's an A. Notwithstanding, regardless of these facts, regardless of the danger, sorry?
Yeah.
Aha. I like the short one, we got yet, but, don't forget those, yet and but, the two short ones for contrast. And then we have some other ones that might not work in this scenario, but still show contrast. Others like what? On the other hand, right? How about simply this? In contrast. Anything else? Yeah, there's probably some others, but I'm not going to pretend to give all. The idea is it would have to be a word or phrase that would be kind of like opposite of what you would think. They're in contrast with each other. So the reason I ask this question first is, does the information contrast? Is because it's easy to tell. If it doesn't contrast, I go, oh, let me go cross out however and nevertheless. Right? Because they offer me however and nevertheless. And whenever your students don't know what to pick, however always sounds good. But let's get rid of however and nevertheless because there's no contrast. Okay? So, these kind of words to trigger, there's a contrast. The next C. correlation. I gave you some information, and now this information is related to it. Now, the thing is, we can have general correlations, and we can have specific correlations. So let's talk about some general correlations. I told you some stuff, and now I'm going to tell you some more stuff about the same idea. Furthermore, I got more to say. I got more to say. Moreover, let's put our two short ones here. And, or also, more stuff related. What else? So, additionally, in addition, I'm not going to write in addition. You get it. I got more to say. What are going to be some specific correlations? Not only is what I'm about to tell you related together with the stuff in front, not only is it related, it's related in this specific way. For example, it's related as specifically an example. For instance, same thing. I'm not going to write it because it's the same thing, right? How about this? Similarly means not only is it related, but it's a parallel example. It's paralleling what I just said. Similarly, this follows logically the same as that. Same thing with likewise, right? These two are pretty, but they say essentially the same thing. It's related as a similar or parallel example. How about this one? In other words, what does that mean? What you're about to get is an abbreviation of what I just said. A repeat. Maybe not an abbreviation, but it's going to be a repeat, or in trying to rephrase it so maybe it's more clear, which leads me to in short, which is we expect it to be, a summary or a shortened version of what I just said. That clarifies. So we got some general correlations and some specific correlations. Can you guys think of anything else? You're going to run into some answers eventually, and you're going to go, really? That's your transition? But the others I can't put. I've ruled the others out. I won't say it because eventually you will run across it. I want to see if you can catch it by ruling out the others. All right, so here's your second C, correlation. I would say that determining between contrast and correlation is pretty easy. Here's where students make logical errors. And I think people in general, throughout history, here's the real challenge. Is it simply correlative, or is it causal? Does this information that I've given you cause the next information to happen? And I think that's why we have things like superstitions. I don't know, I'm just telling you, my aunt was walking on the street, this black cat walked in front of her, she broke her leg. I think it's a witch. It's a witch! Don't trust black cats, okay? We arrive at silly conclusion. I'm giving you a silly example, but people are ascribing causality where the poor cat happened to be walking there and gets blamed for it, right? We do this all the time. We do this all the time where we ascribe cause where there's only correlation, right? So, we'll run into some examples, but you have to ask yourself, does this info actually cause this to be true? If so, we expect to see words like what?
As a result of.
I'll get to that one, yep, that's correct. The most common, therefore, his cousin, thus, I heard someone say, as a result. What else? Due to?
Because.
Now, I'm going to put because a little separately, because it absolutely shows causality, but it shows it in the opposite direction, right? This is true because of this, so in other words, this caused that. Does that make sense? These all say my first causes the second. But it's absolutely caused, but in the opposite direction, good. Due to, as a, therefore, thus is right. Here's one that not too many students catch because they don't understand necessarily this application, but necessarily, that doesn't mean that it's necessary, it just means, it's like saying, as a result, this necessarily will happen. Therefore, thus, as a result, consequently. Consequently. And this one has two short little ones as well. So, now this could be just a timing transition, telling me order of events, but it could also be part of what? An if-then statement. It could be part of like, this is true, then this must also be true, right? So then could also be a causal link. What else? Anything else? There are others. But these are the most common ones. Okay? Let's go apply some. Let's open our texts to, let's go to number 9. Now, obviously we would normally have read things up to this point, but we won't need to here because we're just looking on either side. We're looking at either side of the transition. We're on page 1214. 1214. Is there anyone who does not have the book? Everyone has it now? Good? Good, good. Okay, so can I get a volunteer to read what's in front of this proposed transition? Starting with, goes to, well, how long is the sentence?
It starts at nutrition.
Oh, it starts at Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt. Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, Wesley?
Greek yogurt is slightly lower in sugar and carbohydrates than conventional yogurt is.
Good to know. Lower in sugar and carbohydrates. What about the information afterwards? And don't read it with the proposed transition, just read it for what it is, for what it says. Volunteer to read afterwards, where it says because it's more concentrated.
Because it is more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving, thereby helping people
Stay something longer. Okay, so before, what's the info? Low in sugar and carbohydrates. Afterward, what's the info? High in protein. Is that in any way in contrast, like unexpected? No. So we're going to go down and look for any contrasts. They don't offer any contrasts. Okay, I was getting ready to cross out however, nevertheless, they didn't offer. Next, the question is, does the fact that it's lower in sugar and carbohydrates cause higher protein? Not necessarily. I know water is low in sugar and carbohydrates and not high in protein, right? And there's others. So no, so let's go cross out all of our causality. And by the way, why is the fact, oh no, this is this one, never mind. So we're going to cross out therefore, right? It's not causal. So it's got to be either a general correlation or a specific correlation? Is being higher in protein a restatement of being lower in sugar and carbohydrates? No, crossed out B, it's not in other words. Is being higher in protein an example of lower sugar and lower carbohydrates? Is that an example of having lower? No, it's not speaking to sugar and carbohydrates at all. And that's where, we're gonna say, well, no, it's not an example of being lower. It's just an example of protein being higher. So it's just more. I'm still talking about the attributes of Greek yogurt. And it's just an additional thing, so we're gonna go with also. Does that make sense?
I'm confused, what are you talking about?
We're looking at number 9, right?
So confused, yeah.
We read before that Greek yogurt is low in sugar and
Oh,
carbohydrates.
so no change is what?
So we would go no change. Oh, by the way, a lot of students get tripped up over this. And I should clarify. I forget about this, but I get a lot of questions on this. For some reason, students think in the writing section that no change is some sort of a special answer. No, it's just another option. No change meaning leave it as it is. The option we gave you in the text versus B, C, or D. It just, you're not any more or less likely to pick no change. It's just one of your 4 options, don't make a thing of it, okay? So the point is, there's no contrast, there's no cause, it's just more info, so I'm gonna go with also. Yes?
So I think you were talking about it in the math section, but you were like, picking like not the right answer or not the correct answer shown is like not a good option, or it's not usually that option. But
Let me
it's
speak to,
different.
let me clarify that, because there is some confusion on that point. Let me make it very clear in the math section. Answer not given is possible. Don't go, oh, that's not it. It could be, check the other options. Check all the options. One of them works, then it's there. So saying answer not given is quite plausible, because when you check your answers and none of them work, well, the answer is not given. The one I said in the math that is almost never it is there's not enough information to determine. Why would that be evil? To ask you to determine something and not give you enough information to determine it. That's just wrong. Put you in a round room and demand you sit in the corner. Yeah, so that's the issue in the math, right? That has nothing to do with which option it is. So the way we look at this is just A, no change is just another of the options. There's nothing special about it. Nothing special about it. It just happens to be the right choice here. Let's go and take a look at number 14. And you can tell it's a 3 C's issue when you look at the options, right? You look at the options in 14, you're like, oh, here's a 3 C's issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I gotta find my relationship, contrast, correlation, cause. What's the deal? So let's read in front and find out what kind of information is there. And by the way, you'll notice that you're gonna have to combine the 2 sentences. So when I say read in front, we really need to start with typically, because it's, running together. Volunteer, please?
I can do it.
Please, thank you.
Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer. This follows several weeks of higher temperatures.
Okay, so before they tell me what's typical, ice sheet does this at this certain time. Perspective, timing, quantity, and degree, guess what? Also impact the writing. Perspective, timing, quantity, and degree. If you see any timing issues or quantity issues in the writing, it matters. It's gonna affect this as well. So just note to self, I see a timing issue. Okay, so that's what happens before. What happens after? Don't read the proposed transition, read the info after.
Several weeks of higher temperatures.
Is this most?
In the summer.
In the summer of 2012, virtually the entire Greenland ice sheet underwent thawing at or near its surface by mid-July, the earliest date on record. Most scientists.
Okay, no, so primarily just the sentences. Sometimes we do need to check two sentences, but the vast majority of the time, it's a sentence before and a sentence after. So the information before tells us what typically happens. By midsummer, or by late summer, we see some thawing. What happened in 2012? Does it contrast with the typical? I start with my question, does it contrast? I see a little head shake, what's the contrast?
Because July is early summer.
Because, yeah, now, that would be a wicked evil thing to do, to say, mid-July. Timing. That's not late summer, haha. But, they threw you a bone, comma, what's the very last thing they tack on the end? The earliest on record, that's not the norm. That's not the typical. That's a contrast. Which one's contrast?
However.
Next question. Right? Does it make sense? Okay. Let's do one more. Let's forward to 27. And I'm not going to say anything. I want you guys to just quietly consider the information before and the information after, make your choice, and in about 1 minute or so, we'll check your answers. Okay, so before I check your answers, I want to check, what does option A show? Contrast, cause, correlation. Which one? Option A, however, shows contrast. I wouldn't expect this based on this. What does B show? Correlation. I said some stuff, I said some more stuff. What does C show? Causation, causality. Does this stuff cause this to be true? And what does likewise show? Specific correlation is a parallel example of. What's your answers? I said some stuff, I said some more stuff. Right? Having office equipment doesn't cause them to have meeting rooms. Right? So B. Alright, so those are your 3 C's, and we got a little practice there, right? Good, let's go on to the next issue. This one, your notes should say sentence placement. Some students have no problem with sentence placement. They just start naturally getting all of them right, and so I don't want to overcomplicate it, but I do know a lot of students have a lot of difficulty. This has such a big impact on your writing section, because pretty much every passage has like 2 of them. So it's one of the most common questions. And so because it has such a big impact, we need to make sure that you know how to manage them correctly. There's 3 types of sentence placement questions as I see it. First, there's, should the author add this sentence? Do you remember seeing these kinds of questions?
Yeah.
Should he add it? Second, already you know which ones I'm talking about, you don't like it. You see that underlined sentence? Should the author delete it? And the third one is, you see that underlined sentence? We're keeping it. Where should we place it? Where should it be placed? So, see this new sentence? Should we add it? See that sentence? Should we delete it? See this sentence? Where should we put it? Sentence placement. Those are all To me, the same question, because I applied the same strategy for all three of these sentence placements. Okay? So let's take a look at what the strategy is for sentence placement. The strategy point is flow in, flow out. So my one friend that I told you about, who also does the test prep, he has a different strategy that I like. We've discussed it, I'm like, yeah, no, I think my students do better with this. So I'm better with him. I'm just kidding. We have a little friendly debate about it. To me, his strategy is like, I don't see my students catching that necessarily. This you absolutely will catch. We're going to start by read the sentence in question. Read the sentence in question. And we're going to look inside that sentence for clues for what kind of information should be flowing into this, and what kind of information should flow out of this. He expects students to read the whole paragraph, which takes more time, and find a break in the logic. I'm like, I don't see, they're not always going to catch that. Here you can go right to the sentence and see what should flow into this and what should flow out of it. What kind of clues will we look at for the flow in? We're going to read that sentence. We're going to look at these clues for flow in. We're going to look for pronouns. Why?
Are important.
He hit his head on the door. Who did? If you don't tell me in the previous sentence, I can't put this here. I can't use the pronoun except to refer to someone that must be in the previous sentence. Does that make sense? Yeah. It only got worse over time. What did? I better know what it is from the previous sentence, yes? Okay. So I'm looking for pronouns. I'm looking for words like, ready? This, that, these, those, the. Why are these words helpful?
They qualify what we're looking for.
They are, first of all, we have like demonstrative adjectives / pronouns. These circumstances only grew worse over time. Well, what circumstances? I better have been talking about them in the previous sentence. Those, the dog almost got hit by a car. What dog? If there's not a dog in the previous sentence, I shouldn't be saying that here. Make sense? Or was it? Yeah. All right, so those are huge clues for what I would see in the previous sentence. And you know the 3 C's we're talking about? The 3 C's transitions? Why are they going to help? Because they tell me the relationship between what comes after and what comes before, yes? So if you see the word but, okay, this is going to contrast with that. Therefore, oh, that's got to cause, the previous sentence better cause this to happen, right? So your 3 C's transitions can help if you see any of those words. Timing. Timing can be words like subsequently. Oh, this is in a particular order of events. What else could be helpful? The verb tense. Wait, this verb's in the present tense. This is all in the past tense here. This probably comes later. So there are some words, I'm not going to write them all down, but subsequently, afterwards, things that show the sequence, as well as verb tense. It's not just about verb tense, but that can help us with the timing. So these are big clues for what should be flowing into this. Okay? What about the flow out? This is my favorite part. For my flow out, I simply ask this. Why'd you tell me that? Why are you telling me this? If I read the sentence that comes afterwards and I can't answer why they told me that the economy has been getting stronger and stronger, then I shouldn't put it here. Because afterwards should be connected with what? The economy getting stronger and stronger. There are more investments, that would make sense, because the economy's stronger, there's more investments, right? Right? What if afterwards says, I don't know, something like, people like to go swimming. Is that connected to the economy getting stronger? Does the economy getting stronger make people swim? Well, I don't like that flow out, right? Okay. So to me, it's just a real logical. Why'd you tell me that? If I can't answer that question with the next sentence, I shouldn't put it here. And both flow in and flow out better work. There are many questions or many items where the flow in could work here, the flow in could work here, the flow in could work here, but the flow out will only work in one of those places. Okay? And one last thing. This is after this. Read sentence after. Read the sentence that's proposed to come after, and look for, guess what? Look for flow-in clues. Right? Because what if the sentence after says, these new inventions have done whatever, like, oh, that's a clue about what should be in front. And if my proposed sentence isn't talking about new inventions, I shouldn't put it here. Does that make sense? So the sentence in question, what should flow in, but also the sentence after where it's proposed, does that tell me any information about what should be in front? Because sometimes the flow-in clues are not in the sentence in question, sometimes the flow-in clues are in the sentence after. And you go, oh, you know what, I can't put it in here because that would interrupt, because this sentence that comes after absolutely connects with the sentence that's there already. I don't want to interrupt it. Okay? Let's go try this. Let's go to number 5. Section 2, number 5. Okay, I should also clarify for you, you see the black box number 5? That's not, in the text, that's not the sentence number. That's the question number. It does not apply to one of the sentences, it just says answer number 5 now. That black box in the text, it doesn't refer to the text. It just means answer question 5 now. Now go to question 5. Blah, 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 sentence 5. Sentence 5 is you see the little bracket 5? Find the little bracket 5? That is sentence 5. Too many students mistakenly think that the sentence in front of the black box is sentence 5. No, that's actually sentence 6 if you see the bracket. Right? Okay. So, where do we want to place sentence 5? What are we going to do for testing flow in? What are we going to do? Read the sentence in question. Can I get a volunteer to read this sentence in question? And you know I'm going to interrupt you, but go ahead. Stop. Where's my clue already? I already got a clue. It. What? I can't say it randomly. Okay, that's a clue. I'm just saying. Keep going.
If it is improperly introduced into the environment, acid wave runoff can pollute waterways, depleting the oxygen content of streams and rivers as it decomposes.
So for my flow in, I know the sentence prior better be talking about acid wave. Any other flow in clues? I don't know, let's present tense, if that matters, it might not help, but I do observe it. Okay, how about my flow out?
Of streams and rivers and decomposition.
Yeah, why'd you tell me about that? Why'd you tell me about how it could potentially pollute and, pollute streams and rivers as it decomposes? Next sentence better address that, or I shouldn't put it here. Let me now be quiet while you guys go test the different options they give you and see what you come up with where you think it should be placed. And I will tell you that the sentence that needs to come afterwards has a clue in it about what should come in front as well. One of the words we talked about to kind of draw your attention. Who feels confident you have the answer? Say it, what's the answer? Strong C, because the previous sentence talks about acid way. And look at what sentence 3 says, to address the problem that we were just talking about. Make sense? Flow in, flow out. I just don't see my students reading this and catching that break when they're reading through it, you know? Flow in, flow out. Let's go try another one. Let's jump forward to number 22. Let's go to 22. This one is, as I will warn you, is a little tougher in the sense that you better check all your options. Because there might be one place that seems possible, but the question is which is most logical. So check your flow in and your flow out for all options and see what makes the most sense. Look for your clues. Oh, you know what? Let me look for the clues with you first, and then I'll let you do it on your own. Let's read the sentence in question. Box is currently organizing an expedition to gather this crucial information. What's a huge clue? This crucial information? So this crucial information better be in the sentence prior, and it better be information that Box can gather. Then why did you tell me that? Who feels confident you know where it should go?
After sentence 5.
After sentence 5, very confidently, because
It's talking about the information of how the soot is contributing to the melting of the ice sheet, which is what he's trying to.
I can gather this information about how much soot is there and how much the ice sheet is melting. I can gather that information. Okay, so the flow-in works. There's another place where students point to that the flow-in works okay too, but the question is, what about the flow-out? Why'd you tell me that he's putting together an expedition? What's in sentence 6 that tells you, oh, it has to come in front of this? And even help and fund the expedition I just mentioned. Okay? There you go. Did anyone think it could go somewhere else? Where did it look like you thought it might could go? After 2. The pattern he observed in 2012 may repeat with harmful effects on the Arctic ecosystem. Can he gather that information? I don't know if that's information you can gather, but if you can, the flow out, why'd you tell me that? Well, the flow out, the next step for Box and his team is to travel to Greenland to perform direct sampling of ice in order to determine just how much soot is contributing to the melting of the ice sheet. Now, if you had stopped at the beginning, you might have said, hey, Box and his team, that could be the expedition for the flow out, right? I see why that looks plausible, but number one, if you read on, you see, oh, how much soot is contributing to the melting of the ice, there's more information that can be gathered. And so that should have drawn your attention to go, I better go check my last option as well. And the last option is better, especially because the sentence after says, the expedition. Okay? All right, so there we go. So there's another very important type of question. Everybody turn to number 16 real quick. This is just a random note. Everyone look at number 16, option D. I want you to circle the word being, and I want you to put a slash through it, stick your tongue out at it, go, and never pick being again. It's not being. Being is one of our red flags. Being is one, if it says being, yeah, that's not the answer. I've seen it used once correctly in the last 16, there's six or so years. Over multiple tests, right? So why is being such a hard, like, yeah, that's not it? Because it's so passive and there's always a better way to word it. If you see any answer that has being in it, and you pick it for an answer, 100 push-ups. Some sort of serious penalty. I say that because some of you are going to pick answers with being in it over, I bet you. At least that happened with my student, another student, a one-on-one student. I went over this being, the whole thing. She came in the next class and she goes, I caught being in this one. I ruled it out, good for you. Later she got caught on being on another one. So I've seen also where all options force you to use being. Okay. I'm not gonna get trapped by it, right? So obviously I have to use being, it's not an option. But that's different. 7? All right. So that's just a little side note. Next, let's talk about the punctuation concerns. Punctuation concerns, and then we'll go practice a couple punctuation rules. All right. Rule number 1, if you're trying to fix an underlying portion, look everywhere in the sentence for other punctuation that could possibly impact this, okay? So let's write, heading is punctuation. Don't be myopic. Don't get caught into and sucked into this one little portion of the sentence. See the sentence in its entirety. So we're going to look for other punctuation in the sentence that could potentially impact what we do here. That's one of their faves. Okay? And when you spot that other punctuation and such, you then ask the question, well, let me put it this way. If you see another comma somewhere else, and there's a proposed punctuation here in this underlying portion, we need to ask ourselves if this phrase is an independent clause or a dependent clause. Why does that matter? Because we use different punctuation depending on the situation. So you must always be looking for independent clauses, which, can someone put that in other words for me? What's an independent clause?
It can stand by itself.
It's a completed thought, could stand on its own as a sentence. What's a dependent clause?
Depends on other.
It's a fragment, it doesn't stand on its own. Now, you have to be aware, a lot of times they'll change punctuation and change words. So, in this scenario, you would want to use the semicolon because it separates two completed thoughts. You guys knew that, right? But we're going to put in the semicolon, we're going to add in another word that makes this a fragment or a dependent clause. Now you can't use a semicolon, right? So not only will they swap punctuation on you, they'll also swap a word that turns it from an independent to a dependent or vice versa, right? So watch that little sneak. It's not always just about the punctuation, it's also about the word that changes what kind of clause it is. And so you're always looking, is this an independent clause? Is this a dependent clause? Or, what's a parenthetical? What's a parenthetical clause? What are parentheses? Right? When I was your age, this is what we used, parentheses, to make a what? A parenthetical statement. You know, I don't have to put this here, but I'm gonna insert it because I want to clarify something. I think it would be good for you to know this here. But I could remove it and it stands on its own. Over time, they started to kind of want to get rid of parentheses. I don't know, they just don't use them as much as they used to. They started going with we'll just use commas. So if you ever see anything between commas, you want to go, okay, if this is between commas, I can test it as a parenthetical. Let me remove it from my sentence and see how it reads without it. If it reads well without it, you probably want the two commas. You probably have a parenthetical. If you read it without that portion, bless you, if you read it without that portion and it makes no sense, you don't want a parenthetical. That simple. Now, the most recent addition, I don't know when it started, someone said, okay, here's the thing, parentheses, if we go to just commas, what if my parenthetical has a parenthetical? I got all these commas. And so some English professor trying to justify his salary goes, well, let's do this instead. I'm gonna go with dashes. That way, if there's any commas in here, we still know that it's parenthetical. And I'm like, well, why don't we just use parentheses since it's a parenthetical? But, you know, gotta make some changes and justify our positions as English professors. Obviously, they don't have to have the commas in there, but understand, these are three different legitimate, perfectly good ways to separate a parenthetical. Now, I have a little meme with Dash from The Incredibles. Dash in, dash out. If it's a parenthetical inside your sentence, we want to dash in and we don't want to dash out. However, these people are evil. I've seen them do this. I've seen them give a dash, parenthetical, and then a period. You can do a dash in to a period, because that's still a dependent clause that's not necessary to the sentence, right? And then you know what these buggers did? They put a comma. So wait a second. Oh my, look at all these marks on the board. So there's a dash in to a period. And in that phrase, they had a comma. And my students go, oh, dash in, dash out. That doesn't work. And crossed it out, but that was the answer. It's possible that this dash ends in a period and happens to have a comma in it. So be careful if the dash leads to the end of a sentence or not. They don't do it a lot, but if it happens and you catch it, I'll be psyched for you. Yes, the primary use is dash in, dash out. That's if it's in the middle of a sentence. But do note, it could come at the end of the sentence potentially. Okay? More punctuation. Ooh, real quick, wrap it up. Have you guys ever heard these called hard stops? Hard stops. A hard stop requires an independent clause in front. And then I'll put a period as a hard stop. A semicolon is a hard stop. And a colon is a hard stop. All of them require an independent clause in front. If you don't have a completed thought in front, you can't use period, semicolon, or colon. The period requires an independent clause afterwards as well, as does the semicolon, right? They both, all right, I know an English teacher somewhere will want to stab me in the back for saying this, but if you could use a period, you could use a semicolon. It's not exactly, but the point is, there's not too much difference between a period and a semicolon. Okay, semicolon means this sentence is related to it somehow. I went to the store, semicolon.
There was a truck.
It took me a long time because of the truck stalled in or whatever. It's related to me going to the store. Yeah. But I could have put a period too, potentially, right? All right, so that's hard stop. Now, here is the part that no one knows about with the colon, at least, hopefully, I don't know, we'll see. What comes after a colon?
A list.
That is option one. That is option one. It could be a list. And that list could be a list of one thing or more. Today I want to talk to you about my favorite animal, colon, the kangaroo. Or it could be many. I want to talk about my favorite animals, colon, the kangaroo, the koala, and the wallaby. I went all marsupial on how my brain was thinking. I guess I want to go to Australia next. Yeah, so it could be a list of one or more. Now here's the part that students are not familiar with. I can put an independent clause, colon. I see the look on some of your faces. You don't understand what I'm saying here. So let me give you a definition or an explanation of what I just said. If I use a term, if I use an expression, and I feel like I better explain myself, I can put a colon, and I can put the definition or explanation, and here's the killer that confuses some students. It can be an independent clause. It doesn't have to be. It can be an independent clause. And I'm on record a few years back at Pinkerton saying, because students said to me initially, well then, how would I be able to tell, if I got two independent clauses, how would I be able to tell if it was a semicolon with something related, or a colon with specifically a definition and an explanation? And I go, they're not that evil. They're that evil. Like, a couple of tests later, I go, oh my God, that's just mean. You expect, yeah, if it's specifically a definition or an explanation, you must use the colon, not the semicolon. So this covers some of the most important, it has a big impact. We're going to come across other writing issues. I'm not going to pretend to teach you the English language. You guys, when you read through it, your instinct will get you right on most of it. So what I want to do is, I've given you these because they have such a big impact, but let's find out what trips you up. What trips you up the most, and then let's go answer and attack those issues. Yeah. Homework, section 2, and I want you to also go to practice test 3 and do section 3, the short math. Let's get back and from now on, all of your homework will include one verbal, one writing, one verbal, one writing. I said that. One verbal, one math, one verbal, one, so that we stay current with all of our strategies the rest of the way through. So,
Section 3
practice test 1, section 2, which we we're just talking about. Complete that. Don't worry too much about the time because we're just getting used to it. And practice test number 3, which in these books is the previous test because there's no practice test 2. Don't ask. Someone was drunk when they put that book together, I guess. Do practice test 3, section 3. Practice test 3, section 3. And get out your watch your language and cheat sheets and have that out. Don't worry about the time yet. Watch your language and cheat your way through that as much as possible. And we will talk. Even if you can do it algebraically, I want you to be thinking, how could I cheat this? Could I just plug your pairs in? Yeah. All right? And I'll see you guys again.